I have studied the science of metaphysics, which is my heart, for 32 years. The way that I've gotten into it, some of you have heard on tape. I don't want to kind of go into that too much, but I had a choice between going very corporate, taking on a church, and I call it taking on a church because it was a large church and it entailed a lot of responsibilities, and I'm not a hypocrite. I do not play with the God or the Creator, and or going into the very political world of Chicago. I had opportunity to do that and then go from there. Something changed in my life that really a lot of people don't get the opportunity to have, and I thank the Creator for that. If you hear me use that word Creator, that's my name for the universal prime Creator, the first cause. Everything else becomes religious and secular, and I'm really not into that in too much anymore. But there have been so many miracles in my life, I'd have to show gratitude to the Most High, to the Creator, for having been aware of my need and listening to a little soul like me by having miracles happening in my life. One of the things that happened in 59 and 60, and I preface all of what I'm going to go into with this because it will let you understand me a little bit better. I'm a very frank person, a very honest person, and I do not back down. Sometimes I should. I'll try to walk away from a situation if necessary. But I have principles. I don't like to compromise them. Anytime I have compromised them in my life, I've gotten in trouble, and I don't intend to get in trouble for doing the right thing any longer. If I do the wrong thing, that's one thing, but not for doing the right thing. So I take strong stance. Some people like that, some people don't. I really don't care. I try to tell the truth. Now, with that in mind, I had an incident, 59 and 60, by which I had a big decision as to whether to go very corporate or to get into the field of ufology, UFOs. If there was such a thing, I had read a number of books. They don't have the bombardment that they now have on TV and the media, whereas it was more or less a kind of a clandestine thing. I was 17 years old at that time, and just completing, I was always smart, if you say, and I was just getting out of undergrad school and about to see where I was going to embark. But one thing stood in my mind. If there was anything to this concept about UFOs or what they were called flying saucers, then it meant that all of my little education and all the things that the church had told me, all the things that mother and father had told me were wrong because they were not believers in these things. And if they were, to me, it meant that someplace on earth or someplace somewhere, there were people with intelligence that dwarfed ours, and those are the people I'd want to learn from. Not somebody who is just a little bit more intelligent than I, but a person that could do this kind of thing. And plus the fact it meant there must be some kind of a hidden history that abounded that I was not privy to, and I always wanted to know whatever I could to make me a rounded person. I had the opportunity of going to a UFO symposium at that time in Chicago. It was all I could do to scrape together the money for it because I was not making a lot of money at that time. And I met a man by the name of George Adamski. George Adamski was a Polish man who was holding a seminar there. I just about crashed into his press again when he was addressing the press and doing his press forum. He lied and said, well, I know the young man, it's okay, or else they would have arrested me. And then we spent some 5 hours in dissertation. This man had just gotten off of a plane from Yugoslavia, interesting enough, and was over here to make, I think, about 16 principal cities. That was the first one in his entourage. To make a long story short, he answered a lot of my questions to the depth that no one else had been able to do so. And then he gave me a challenge. He said to come back the next day as part of this forum he was giving. I did come back the next day. I told him I didn't have any more money, and of course I had a girlfriend at that time and a lot of other friends, but none of them wanted to go on these forays. Through him, I met two very interesting men. They were both black men at that time. One was wearing an extreme natural, which was not the case in 60, and the other has close-cropped hair, looked like a corporate entity, if you would. And not only did they read my mind, predict the future by 15 minutes, so I didn't have to wait to see if they were truthfully able to do this or not, able to make me lose time. I lost about 10 minutes only in the time I understand. But then also gave me some answers that no other people had been able to do, and then gave me a challenge also. They said to watch the skies for the next week. I asked them, were such things as UFOs and this kind of thing, and they said, well, just watch the skies for the next week, if you would. Well, I had always watched the skies. I hadn't seen anything that was mysterious to me. That next week in the city of Chicago, I was going to the University of Chicago at that time, and what they call the quads. Quads are simply the rear end of 4 student dorms and faculty dorms that face onto a plaza. Well, I saw these 3 moving objects, and they came down to no more than, I guess, 800 feet above me. If you've ever seen anything like that, you'll never forget it. And it was a close-eye view of 3 flying saucers back in 1960. It was a very interesting phenomena. I questioned myself about it, and I really didn't talk about it other than to 3 people that happened to see it with me for 10 years. I didn't because I didn't feel anybody would believe me. I really didn't feel that I could benefit from it, understanding what was happening to people that did talk about it. And all I needed was that verification to turn my life around. I really didn't care at that time whether anybody else believed it or not, because I was unbelieving until all these things happened to me. Not being a hypocrite, I had stated that if I could ever find out that these things were real, and what more than to see them or think that you saw them, and I do think that I saw them. And one, by the way, made a motion that just was, they were sitting 3 abreast, say about 800, 850 feet in the air, guesstimation. One just said, boom, it lit up, got brighter. By the way, too, as they hovered, they waved like a feather on water, or, again, or on a pond or a stream. And then one got kind of bright and swooped. It was just as though it was there one time and then gone. It just showed, I can't even calculate speed. The thing was gone as far as I could see, like a flash. The second one began to make right-angle turns up and low and spun as it was doing this. It took those oscillations, I guess, about almost 6 minutes, and it went out slowly out to the other direction. In the meantime, I kept trying to look at it as it was going away back at the main one, because showing how fast one of them had gotten away from me, I didn't want the other to go before I was able to really give a keen sight to it. To make a long story short on all of this, the last one, the other one just made these right-angle turns and so on. The other one just slowly went backwards, retreated from me, went up, I don't know how far, but not too far out, but mainly away from me, showing me just 3 distinct motion capabilities and aerodynamic concepts that they were able to do. With that, of course, there have been so many miracles in my life from that time on, but never have I made contact verbally with anybody else that I felt was either alien or extraterrestrial. And to me, an alien is anything that's intelligent in the cosmos. It could be a grasshopper, it could be a spider, it could be a humanoid form, whatever, as long as it's intelligent. It would definitely be alien to us. To me, extraterrestrial, and as it was explained to me, is an intelligent being that has had a liaison either on this planet or a planet like this one, and therefore can be sympathetic or empathetic to what we're going through. I have not had such a contact knowingly since. If they've been there, they haven't announced it. And all I have done is to see what has happened as a result of that, which increased psychic power with me. Just miraculous things have happened with me, and that's it. I give that as a preface because it will probably help you to better understand what I'm going to say and better understand me. Now, whether or not you are believers is not important. I'm not here to sell UFOs. I give that because it will show you the very strong conviction and the very strong eminence that changed my life around. Now, we are faced at this time with some very interesting challenges, shall we say. We have a financial system that's in a process of being changed with the extreme right-wing Congress, and I'm not going to stay real political, but politics are still the backbone of this nation, and they can't be skirted, because what happens in Congress and what happens with all of those so-called servants and political machinations that surround that happens to you, from taxes on or down. We're finding cutbacks in education. We're finding cutbacks in Medicaid and Medicare. We're finding cutbacks in a lot of programs because there's not enough money for them. We're finding the Social Security system being challenged, or possibly even some say bankrupt. We're finding our banking system, again, backed not entirely by the FDIC as it used to be. We're finding the Federal Reserve making laws that nobody seems to be able to circumvent, and they are controlling our lives, our taxes, everything that we do. Based on all of that now, we're finding that the Cold War supposedly has ceased. The Cold War, of course, was supposedly where we were dumping, meaning we, the United States of America, lots of money into to keep communism from usurping and taking advantage of us and usurping a democratic free form of society, a republic, if you would. We also are finding that those money that used to be spent for that are now free to be spent other ways, but yet the monies aren't there because there's a deficit and we can't balance the budget. And I make just one statement to you as a lay person, secular as I would be in the ministry, but as a person who is not a politician. How in the world can we ever balance a budget if the Federal Reserve charges $1 for every dollar that they put into circulation? Just that alone will show you that a balanced budget is stupid and silly and should not even be questioned, because as long as $1 is being charged by an entity outside of the United States government to print the money, then it means that all money printed will have taxes on it, and that is not what a republic is supposed to have happen. But in addition to all of that, we're finding again that there are certain black projects. Now, the black projects is a clandestine, nefarious overview of having Congress not appropriate money to the Defense Department or to armed forces or any other research arm, and yet they are spending literally billions, if not trillions of dollars to research into items that are not authorized by the United States government, Congress, but programs, concepts like time travel, like not the stealth bomber, but Avro cars, or the Avro plant that was blew up 60 or 59 or something like that, killing some 39 people, injuring 19, a joint project between the Canadian government and the United States government to build electromagnetic saucers all the way back there. They have projects now supposedly on the moon, projects on Mars, projects in time travel. And again, if you hear about the Philadelphia experiment, which I think has made movie history by being constantly circulated over 40 years' time, and about the Montauk project, then you can understand that there are a lot of things going on that are not being corporately funded, not being funded by the government, but still in all are receiving monies. You hear nefarious things about drugs and the people, and especially the inner city youth in about 164 major cities that are drug users, and that the drug thing must be stopped. How can a drug thing be stopped when the government seemingly sanctions it, or cannot find out what everybody on any city blocks knows, where the local pusher is? To put people in jail who consume it and not people who bring it in is ridiculous. If I went on to point out all the things that the United States is guilty of, you'd all in there either crying or hating me for telling the truth. I'll say all you have to do is read certain books, A Higher Form of Killing. Waxman and Paxman came out of England. Read again about the poison needle, Eustace Mullins. Just read about the nefarious things that are being done by this country, not by the citizens. Because I find whether black, white, yellow, or brown, most citizens are not aware of this. And those that do seem to know about it talk about it in hushed terms about why is this happening. It's as though we're led by force or by someone who just is intent on being bad, negative, and no good. Now, if that's trite, then understand that triteness is the basis for goodness. Because when we are children and are not so conformed and brainwashed, we understand right and wrong. We understand basic things we should not do. Then we're told either we can get away with it or we're told it's not bad, and therefore those minds now being sublimated now follow on this new type of teaching authority. Used to be moral authority rested in the church, and non-secular authority rested in the institutions of higher learning. I often wonder what institutions of higher learning are now teaching, because to me they're professing things now that only seem to get us in trouble. The true research scientists that comes up with cures for cancers, comes up with cures for AIDS, or proffers those. Their laboratories are bombed. Their papers are, sometimes they're in prison, again, like in the case of Wilhelm Reich. It just goes on and on. So I'm saying this. In case you wonder why some of the things that I'm going to get into tonight may be happening or may happen, look no further than your own mirror. Either you've allowed this to happen because you think it's funny, or because of naivety, or you know others that you should correct and you're afraid to approach them because they might hurt you, or you have no soul yourself about what is right and wrong. Everybody that allows things to go on that should not go on, for either fear of safety of self, or for naivety, or for money profit, therefore has to pay when the chips come down. We've done a lot of wrong here. This country is far from being not guilty of a number of terrible, what can I say, just terrible things. We'll leave it like that. At the same time, there are far worse countries and far worse regimes that run those countries. But now, with what is called the New World Order, these things are being amalgamated. The good now becomes the bad, and the bad becomes the not so bad. Things can now be allowed as long as this one rule can come under the guidance now of the government forms that will let one world exist, one means of distribution, manufacture, one means of production, and one world card. Because the end result of the New World Order is to have one world card, no money systems, all monetary systems obfuscated. We are finding now that there are old plagues that are now coming around to become new scourges. They talk about Lambia Guardia, or Guardia Lambia. They talk about Ebola. They're talking about, again, and I have a quote from this paper here, if I can find it. I think they call it the Bedigay or Degay, a new disease coming out of Mexico, out of the Mato Grosso, where they're cutting down the trees. They have viruses of all sorts, and of course the AIDS pandemic not only threatens blacks, but it threatens not only homosexuals, but it threatens heterosexual people from all walks of life. We're finding again that the ozone, the hole that supposedly started over one of the poles of the United States, of the world, has now spread not only over the United States, but over almost all major continents. This hole in the ozone allows ultraviolet UF rays to come through, which are very detrimental to people who have very little skin pigmentation, as well as to people who have a lot of skin pigmentation. What this is causing is melanomas and carcinomas, melanomas of the skin, carcinomas and leukemias of the blood. It is causing the body, which is not able to take in this new ultraviolet energy, this new energy rays, to burn, to fry. It causes, again, an imbalance within the glandular systems against the things that are secreted. It causes, again, as I say, the blood to become toxic. And once we reach a crisis in toxemia, disease and imbalance always sets in. We have as though the planet was actually turning on us. They found that at Chernobyl, and I don't think there's anyone in here that has not heard of Chernobyl, again, that gaseous cloud, whatever it was made up of, drifted away. And there are reports of devastating things that this cloud, which is not completely dissipated, is still able to do. Of course, the Russian government denies that, Interpol denies that, and the UN scientific community only gives lip service to it, and not before the public press, which never repeats the idea that some atomic cloud could maybe be drifting over, causing all kind of devastation. They're finding, of course, now that on the moon, where they supposedly spent 15 trips to, and I doubt that very seriously, that they have found pyramids on the moon. They don't talk about it. They found round dome structures on the moon. They found an OB-17 bomber on the moon. They find corpses of what looks like human people, again, on the moon. They found, even with Virgil Grissom and many of the other astronauts, Neil Armstrong and so, that reported that they had been paced and had seen UFOs or some type of unidentified flight objects, not only on the surface of the moon, but pacing them on their journeys to the moon when they actually went. If you remember, again, back in 1959, 1960, when President Kennedy came into power, one of the things that got him incorporated into the United States head congressional person was the fact that he said, we must have a race to space that we must win, meaning the United States must win, that we must beat the Russians to the moon. Then, having put all kind of money, changed again Cape Canaveral to Cape Kennedy, put all kind of resources and monetary and brain power into this, the Russian launched 2 weeks before the supposed United States launch, they launched Sputnik. Then, nothing was ever heard about what happened to the Russian launch. Nothing was ever heard, and all you heard was the United States' prowess and progress into the space race. What did happen was very interesting. In my reading of various books and so on, I'll give you a book list later on if you like it. It's yay long. But at any rate, was that a female by the name of Yuri someone, being one of the cosmonauts, had stated that the Russian launch was blasted out of the sky by an electrical beam, possibly what they now call a beam weapon. I have no idea. But having been so blasted, many of her comrades were killed and vaporized on the spot. Others were hanging in space where their capsule had been blasted. And as she reported, still on an open mic in her helmet, I guess down to the Russian base again, they are collecting them. This is something she was sobbing, And the last word is supposed to be, and now they're coming for me. I repeat, and now they're coming for me. Now this would make me feel, being a layperson and being ignorant and not able to have the deviousness of some of the newspaper reporters and AP and so on like this, that this woman had been blasted out of her spaceship by something in the sky or from the earth, and that whatever it was able to now transverse space and pick up her hanging in the air in space comrades and herself. One thing is very interesting. After that, Russia stopped so much the race for space and in space and started getting into metaphysical research. They used to talk about secret projects behind the Iron Curtain, psychic projects behind the Iron Curtain. Uri Geller pops up again, and many other people who were supposedly able to use telekinesis by moving objects, mind control, teleportation possibly they talked about. Many of the things that are now what we see on the TV screens and in the movies, what we call New Age projects, they started back there in the 60s and in the 70s. There was said that Brawatunchek and another place, somebody may help me with, another big Russian city, as late as the 70s and 80s had UFO landings there, both in a theme park and also near the Russian embassy in Prague, per se. There supposedly have been a lot of so-called alien contact with the United States. Rumors had been that Eisenhower, rumors had been that Truman had all had UFO contacts, and also personnel that supposedly had driven these ships. Landing supposedly at Edwards Air Force Base, at Lackland Air Force Base, a couple of the other ones again out in California here. All kind of rumors about new, as they say, personnel carriers that hovered in the air, and the land hover, the air vehicle that now was able to go over water and land was then introduced. Of course, nothing about the stealth at that time. It's been said that many people have been abducted on Earth. I don't think you can turn on your TVs now for one solid week without hearing about some UFO abduction, either supposedly in a fictionalized drama or the X-Files or Extraordinaire or whatever again. We're seemingly now blessed or plagued with everything about Deep Space Nine, about Star Wars 5030, about Star Wars this and that. Everything now is about space, about aliens, about new inventions, about dimensional frequencies, about life on other worlds and in our solar system. Why? To me, it's because we're being prepared for something. I don't think that all those billions of dollars on network TV are sent up there for nothing. Something they're preparing for, whether it be actually extraterrestrial or alien or government-controlled, something is happening. If you've noticed again, over the last 10 years, at Christmas, the best sales now are for reptoids and dinoids. Toys, Mutant Ninja Turtle movies come out, and at one time, kids couldn't even stand reptiles in the main. Now they're loving reptiles. Now they're loving Dino, and they're loving all kind of other characters that, of course, not only are sometimes capable of dimensionalizing, but look much different than we do. Interesting enough, we have problems here with the races with just 4 or 5 different colors, and yet now kids are accepting green, scaly monsters and fish people and amphibians. It's true. In the churches, we go here tomorrow on Sundays and Saturdays again, and we say how we love each other, and we can't get along for 5 days during the week. But yet, we can see and sympathize and empathize with E.T., the extraterrestrial, when he got hurt, and then we can go out and lynch somebody else, or we can go out and give poison to somebody else, or we can look the other way where somebody else is falsely accused of a crime. We have a very interesting civilization here. And with this new world order, this civilization is going to get tighter and more chummier. And some of the people that we're beginning to be chummy with, I don't particularly think are the chums we should be running with. That's a personal opinion. As adults, you can make your own. But I will say this. Many of these research scientists know exactly where some of these Ebola are coming from. They know where the Lambia is increasing from. They know through the World Health Organization how they gave in Zaire shots of smallpox vaccines, which already were outlawed through the same august organization on the international market. They understand the hepatitis B vaccine that was contaminated again with AIDS, so they gave it to Greenwich Village on 2 occasions, 78, 79, 72, 73, to homosexuals. They understand that right out here in San Francisco, the Coast Guard frigate that made 8 passes back and forth spraying bacteriologicals into the air so that they floated over San Francisco. San Francisco does have a large homosexual population that has no reason to then to try and ostracize or hurt homosexuals, because there are other people living there too. So if they only hated homosexuals for some reason, then what about the heterosexual population? What about black, white, yellow, and brown, the Asian community that is there? Understand again, at one of the most heavily traversed areas of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, where you can go east, west, north, or south in our United States, during the summer, when people had air conditioning units on, tops down if they were convertibles, windows down, they sprayed bacteriologicals from unmarked black helicopters. They did it in 78, 79, they did it in 83, 84, and who knows how many other times that I have not been able to document through extensive research. We heard that the American Legion, legionnaires, were meeting in a hotel in Philadelphia. And all of a sudden, through the ductwork again, either induced by some accident or otherwise, Legionnaire's disease popped up. But before that time, you heard about, what do they call this? I'm not referring my notes now. I'm doing this all from my mental capability, which sometimes gets limited. They had, again, simplex, herpes. Herpes 1, herpes 2, herpes 3, herpes simplex, and then you didn't hear anything more, but you heard about Legionnaires. Then you didn't hear anything more after about 8.5 months about Legionnaires. You heard about AIDS. And of course, there's no tie-in. There's nothing showing, again, why the yeast infection of Candidiasis and Candida now suddenly has gone crazy within the system. And by the way, I'm going to give you possible remedies and helpers for these things. I can't say cure, because nowadays, to say cure, you over-infractionalize, you step into the world of the allopath. So I can say possibly things that may help, or remedies for these things. But suddenly now, the government cannot control, the FDA cannot control. We're just full of all kind of plagues and viruses by which the immune system, the shots we used to get, don't seem to be as effective as they used to be. The treatments that we used to have don't seem to be making inroads against these new viruses. I simply say if they're laboratory designed, and I think they are from research, if they're asked for, paid for, and then delivered, then they're specifically made genetically to do exactly what they're doing to the people that they're doing it to. The only trouble is we always seem to mistake the Creator, because these people are soulless and spiritless and don't understand what the Creator can do, because they think that they're gods. So as a consequence, we're going to have to pay for that, and they are too. They're going to have to find out that they're not God, and that the very things that they create in their power struggle and their power-hungry mentalities can come back against them, which is doing now in the United States, and will continue until they change. And since I think they're so nefarious they won't change, and we're in for it. Let me again just read you part of an article here. It says, "Old New Plagues, a Latin Scourge." It's not just a Latino scourge, it is now a United States scourge. I'm going to just briefly jump through this. Brazil, it starts with a fever like 100 less deadly plagues. Then comes a growing weakness. The skin turns yellow. In the abdomen, internal bleeding begins. Soon blood pours from the body, through the eyes, and in the endless black vomit. In 9 out of 10 cases, the liver dissolves and the victim dies. No, it's not Ebola. It's Labria black fever. Just one of a half-dozen deadly and little understood viral diseases emerging from the rainforest of Latin America. They were told that those rainforests are one of our chief ways of oxygenating the Western Hemisphere. They don't care. They needed more hotels. Half the hotels they have now are seasonal, and because of the typhoons and hurricanes, they're still losing tourists. But now you have to tear down some more. Let me go on with this one again, to show if you can even look through this, or what you would do given that kind of power. These power-mad people don't seem to give a you-know-what. Let's go on with this again. People all the time are going into the jungle and coming back with strange fevers no one knows about, said Betsy Duary Thatcher, malaria specialist at Brazil's National Institute for Amazon Research in Manaus. If we started looking for them, we could isolate a new variety every week. A new variety every week. Viruses are the unknown frontier. I go on again. Perhaps never has the battle against disease looked so bleak as it does right now in Latin America and in the third world in general. New diseases are appearing at a frightening pace, researchers say. Even more disturbing, old scourges, once thought relegated to history, are making a comeback, particularly in Latin America. Tuberculosis is one of the things that they talk about. Malaria is another one that they talk about. Plasmodia, what is this? Plasmodia juspartum parasite. Okay, and one of these Latin things, it simply means a parasite that can stay on mosquitoes, can stay on flies, tsetse flies, can stay on bees, is also being brought back to people. Worms and other things are carrying it, if you would. In Nicaragua and Honduras, a mystery illness characterized by chills, fever, and severe bleeding in the lungs has been tentatively identified as IS parasitic, an animal disease contracted through contact with animal waste. The outbreak has killed 16 people and sickened more than 2,000 in the two countries over the last 2 months alone. A similar outbreak in Brazil killed more than 40 people and injured more than 3,500. This goes on, and then finally I want to just go over, if I can, some of these other names that they gave for it. Cholera. Oh, please hear this one, according to this article. Human migration also has contributed to the spread of disease, cholera, unknown in Latin America until 1991. Apparently arriving in Peru in bilge water dumped from an Asian ship. Since then, it has sickened a million people and killed 9,000 people. Controlling it in Latin America will take a decade and cost $200 billion, according to estimates by the Pan American Health Organization. I have this article. Some of you may have received it. I tried to run off enough to have it passed out again. What I'm saying to you is that we've got a problem not only with viruses that I think were man-made, but viruses because of greed and a lack of respect for the planet are now being released from the tundra, from areas that to me were not necessary to enroach at this time because we were already having settled in all the land already available to our country, if you would, and to the world. Drive sometime from an urban city, such as Portland. Take a rural highway. You have miles and miles and miles of areas that could be developed. Some of them have trees, some of them don't have trees. In the areas of the earth, we seem to cluster together in small patches and let the rest of the land go by, even though it is livable and tillable. We seem to like to see suffering. I don't know whether it makes us feel better because we're not the ones suffering, to see others suffering, or just what. But we can always find a way to look down upon somebody else and say, well, gee, it's not happening to me, so I don't have to take any action on it. Then when it does happen to me or someone close, then wonder why everybody else doesn't get excited or get upset about it or help. If you help one, you're supposed to help them all. If you can't help any, then don't cry when it does happen to the few or to the one. There is a group here that seemingly is very interested in what is called the serious mystery, that is very interested in what is called the people called the Dogons, or the Dogon people, as I like to call them, in Africa, down in Maui and so. There is a people who seemingly are very interested in what happens with the Tuaregs, what happens with the Shillooks, also people in the Congo and in the deserts of Africa who have a very interesting pastime. Their way of life is predicated upon what seems to happen to the dogs. In fact, the phrase, we're going or I'm going to the dogs, comes from the Dogon people. Okay? For some time, even before Lewin Wack and Ivan Van Clark and other people on the British Astronomer Royal Society viewed with their telescopes what happened in our solar system and viewed what happened outside of our solar system and began to report about what happened in Procyon and what happens in Alpha Centauri, what happened again in the dog stars, if you would, Canis Major and Canis Minor. These people could tell those astronomers more about what happened in Canis Major and on Canis Minor than these astronomers could. It wasn't until around 1860 that they even discovered the Dagon system here. But before that time, these people had pottery, had parchments or tablets that they carved on and rocked on and write on, had things that they circulated and tattoos upon their skins, talking about Canis Major and Canis Minor, the dog stars. That protection and help could come from Sirius. And also, as we begin to follow that back through time, back to the 20th dynasty, the 19th dynasty, and the 18th dynasty heyday in Egypt, we find that they had or shared the same common beliefs. Amongst the Egyptians, whether we think that they were prolific in mental power or just in fecundity, these people reached a height that has not been duplicated if we believe that the pyramids were built during those 1,600 years' time before the 18th dynasty and when Egypt came into prominence. We find there that all that they knew about astronomy, which was very much, they still held two constellations very serious. They held Orion and the Pleiades and Sirius where? In Canis Major, Canis Minor. They stated that those two amongst all must be watched because they believed that the gods came from there. They believed that extraterrestrial or alien life forms, extremely intelligent, seemed to have a lot to do with what happened on this planet and had done so for years. Before I go a little bit into the 18th dynasty, if that does not hold your interest, then Professor Zachariah Sitchin's book and novels talking about Sumeria and the tablets that were found there also talk about the Anunnaki and the same things that took place there, as though there was a lot of interfacing and intercoursing of both goods as well as genetically with people on Earth and people from space. One thing that the Sumerians said, the Akkadians said, the Egyptians, especially in the 18th and 19th dynasty, said was this: those constellations bore watchfulness, should never be far from your mind because of the impact of what they had done and could do pretty much any time that they chose. And to understand their cycles of politics in the cosmos probably might behest man very much. It might be one of the best things that mankind could do. They stated that, and I paraphrase, that Orion in the Pleiades was referred to as Sahil, the foolish, the hunter, always looking for the souls of man and the sublimation of mind's man to turn him away from goodness. They stated that Sirius, Canis Major, was where the dogs, the protectors, were that had a deep interest in what happened on Earth and were always trying to help man if man could begin to turn back from the path he had chosen back to where he had seemingly started from. Now, I don't know if any of that is true. I'm not sure whether any of you even are interested in it, but I will say it interests me. And I will say when I see how much time in Sumner, in Mesopotamia 1, in Akkad, in Egypt, in Nubia, people spent watching the vibrations and emanations and electromagnetics from those planets, then I say something is very interesting about it. We find that during the 18th dynasty, whatever manifested there put an imprint on the genetic structure and the DNA of most of us here. Why do I say that? Roughly about 15 years ago, a entourage came out of Egypt and went through the United States and Canada. It was called King Tut's entourage. It dealt with Akhenaten, his father, and the golden funerary mask, and all of the regals that were found with that society at that time. And yet, think about this, and yet, millions of people in principal cities throughout the United States came out to view this procession, this entourage. It didn't even have any real sarcophagi. It had only face masks, if you would. Whether they had the real gold with it, who knows? But people by the millions lined up in the snow, in the rain, in the heat, to go to the museums in the various cities in the United States to view this entourage, to see just the face mask of King Tutankhamun. Ask you, why? These were not all black people that came out. These were not all white people that came out. These were not all yellow people that came out. Nor were the brown people that came out. People came out. And they didn't even know why. Something in their DNA or RNA structure, something locked in their so-called subconscious vibrated. And they said, this is some procession that must be kin to me, and I want to see it. I just want to be there. I'll tell you why many of the earth people wanted to be there. Because it was the last time on our earth, in even recent history, that the people who had the bloodline of the gods were able to reign upon earth. The people who had psychic power and the ability to work with the animal kingdom, to work with all the various species and kingdoms on earth and honored them. The people who were able to look forward to everlasting life because they knew that the soul could not die and that the soul was threatened again by a soulless wanderer who had come into our system and even called more and more upon their own venerated gods to help them by keeping them in touch with the universal prime creator, for they believed in Aton, or the one God, along with the plurality of gods. In the Old Testament and in the codexes of the Hebrews and the Masoretic text describes, were taken again many books which talked about the wars of the lords, which talked about the Ifrit, which talks about the humans and mankind in terminology that we have forgotten, and told us that there was an abomination that happened on this planet, and that there was an overview of people who wanted to see if this planet could ever outlive the laggard's entry into our solar system and upon this planet. And euphemized in the 18th dynasty, under Queen Tai, Queen Mu, again Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and of course Tutankhamun, the boy king, was the last time when these long heads, and this is why many of the Egyptologists and studies of petroglyph and hieroglyphic writing and these so-called researchers state again that they were stylized drawings from a time when Egypt fell. They were not stylized drawings. That's the way these people's heads were. They had long heads, much like the ancient Assyrians had long heads, and the Syrians had long heads. They showed that there was a genetic structure here incorporated in a DNA, RNA factor that was not normally in the genes of Earth people. And it gave them great power for psychic and telepathic prowess. King Akhenaten, sometimes called by the Greek Akhenamen per se, and Amenophis, or something like Amenhotep, was a general who, when he went out on his battles and so, got tired of the fighting. And when in Taxila, talked with the Phraotes there, Taxila is now Singapore, it was part of Asia, and was introduced to the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, and introduced to Krishna and Buddha. Both of those terms mean the black, or the black ones. Buddha means hail the black. Krishna is the purple-black god of these people. They were told that there had been abominations here, and that Egypt was going to be one of the chief centers for revitalizing this learning process once more, and for seeing if the magical herbs, if the magical incantations, if the knowledge of the underworld and Amenta could now be once more brought back to a people possibly ready for the last time before the wanderers return, what they call the 13th planet, which Christians now call Wormwood, the return of the Dracons. And if there could be a time when the people here could reach enough understanding to stop this scourge from happening again and to continue on the path of righteousness, even with all the many humanoid forms that were now extant upon that earth. Well, seemingly, absolute power corrupts absolutely, as they taught me in philosophy. Because the more power you give to some fools, the more power they want. They're never satisfied with power because they are corrupt in their souls, or are soulless. As a consequence, these priests that were there couldn't take the turn of events that Akhenaten brought forth. Akhenaten changed his name to He Who Worships the Most High Aton, or Ankh-Akhenaten. Ankh being now a scepter, meaning heralding or relegating, and Aton being the Most High. He stated that he would change his name to Ankh-Akhenaten. And then, with all the many wives he had, and by the way, his many wives had given birth also to long-headed babies, which means that that was in his genes for his fulfillment. He had been either placed or planted here, or for some reason he had been changed so he would proliferate this new kind of being. And then he found Nefertiti, supposedly now one of the most beautiful women that ever lived upon the earth, outside of Belikas and Makeda. And again, in finding Nefertiti, he chose her over all of his other wives. Two things he had: a very fervent zest for life and an extremely long head, which is looked upon as one of the marks of beauty, which many of the African people have tried to emulate since that time. Through her, he had supposedly sons. And I won't take it further than that when I say supposedly, because that is something for a black history lesson, and it begins to speak in terms that I don't think I should share with you, but I will say this, which I do think I should share with you. The long-headed babies, either of that union or other unions, and the fact that Nefertiti had a long head and was all very psychic, all of these people were, including Queen Tai, his mother, was the last, as I say, part of the DNA, RNA factor within a people on earth that were set to rule. The right and passage of kings to rule was based again on the ability to control kingdoms. But we didn't understand that that kingdom was not just the kingdom of earth, but the other species kingdom and interdenominational kingdoms. That's what met for the rite of passage for man to come into his higher self. You didn't elect leaders, they were born. You didn't elect rulers, they were born to rule, and they showed it through phrenology, cranial concepts, and the DNA factor. If they couldn't be telepathic, if they couldn't control animals, if they couldn't understand the people, they were not fit to rule. And once you found a bloodline like that, they tried to keep that bloodline going. This is why, as we got into the Serbian and later on European right of kings, where they tried to even use incest to keep a bloodline intact, it was brought on by the Nubian Egyptian dynasties, which showed them that there was something there to protect, and something there that met the right of rulership through spiritual qualities, not just political domination. Once Akhenaten had reached his height, he retreated from the warring world and from the so-called social world and did lots of meditations and began to call upon the gods, as it was said. So much so that Nefertiti began to fear for his life, because understanding the power-mad priest at that time, realized that if he was not a strong ruler and could not maintain an army, that they probably would usurp his power and probably just finally overthrow him. Well, she spoke better than she thought, because in her zeal and fear, she conspired with the priest of Amun, and he was poisoned, roughly around 39 years old at his death. However, they had the son, the boy king, Tutankhamun, and he died between 18 and 19, also poisoned. And one of the curses of that dynasty is that we don't even understand the real names of those people in that dynasty. If Amenphis had changed his name to Ankh-Akhenaten, because he venerated the one high supreme being in the cosmos, the creator of everything, and realized that there might have been lesser servants, which we now would call gods, or nothing but scientists, on other worlds, and respected them, but did not respect him with the same, shall we say, humbleness that he did the Almighty. And he took the time to change his name to Ankh-Akhenaten. Why would he leave his name of his only son, or the son that he most respected, to be called Tutankhamun, after the priest of Amun? In the unity of early Egypt, Amun-Ra, Ra, the Most High Sun God, and Amun from the Nubian dynasty, and there was a great battle that was fought between between I can't think of the guy's name now, Memphis or so on and so forth, and somebody else that represented Nubia. Why would he then have his son be called Tutak, what? Amun. He went against the priest of Amun. He changed his name from Amun. Why would his son be called Tutankhamun? His son would have been called what? Tutankhaten. Tutankhaten. Because it venerated the Most High and the one God, the same as his father had changed his name, as many of the brothers and sisters are now understanding to change their names for the vibrations of same, and it showed again that they were making a step forward in this immortal life. Why did I spend all that time with that? Because it is from the Egyptian technology, the Egyptian religion, and the Egyptian understanding that our whole system of government has now come forth. And what was said to be the first veneration of a higher, what we would call more metaphysical culture, is now sank to the point where it took 1 million men to have to come to the same venerated spot to remind them of the bloodline of the gods that still exist on earth and how it has been persecuted. On the back of the Federal Reserve note, no longer a dollar bill by United States men in Congress, but by unity outside of the United States government, which prints this, the Federal Reserve, are still the symbolic metaphysics that all Masons understand and all secret societies of truth understand. The God-man that was on earth and would return in the 13th quadrant. Everything on here is number 13 multiplied. From the pluribus unum, from the Orbis Chloride, from again the United States seal, from the 13 stars, the tail feathers, the 13 steps again leading up to the Nun, Ziggurat, and the Eye of Horus that floats above it. All of these things simply show that it stated when the culture that was here with the eagle, which is a predator, begins to fully understand the culture that was then, which was in Egypt, or Aton, or Fez, that this money would be worthless. Because the consciousness would have changed and the monetary system therefore must fall and a new world order, Novus Ordo Seclorum, would come into being. This is nothing new. This has been relegated in 1776. It was relegated by the Constitutional Fathers, Benjamin Franklin, who was a Mason, and all the rest of them. And they have fought against the time when people would understand the serpents among us and fight against the serpent people and his kind to restore again the natural man to earth and to our solar system. This fight has never ended. From the garden where the serpent was relegated to one who made Eve eat an apple, misunderstanding that this was 3 races separated from the underworld, the overworld, and the place in between, the surface of earth, relegated to fairy tales that children only believe, and now many Christians do. I am not denouncing Christianity. I am a minister of the Christian faith. I'm saying it's time for foolishness to go and for adulthood to come. Simply, this emblematic piece of magical parchment was a reminder of what has happened on our planet and what could happen on our planet if we fail to follow the upward path. Excuses for an adult are laborious. An adult is supposed to know right from wrong, or the adult should remain a child. Wisdom does not seemingly come with age. But we have found again that some adults here have forgotten what they knew innately as children, those born of woman. We're finding here now that we can find billions of dollars to spend on how to destroy certain DNA molecules, certain DNA fibers, split again all of the fibers and strands of DNA, and hate people just because the people are supposedly too simplistic. And yet, in our wonderful technology of super sophistication, we poison the atmosphere, we poison the land, we poison the water, we kill off animal species, we disregard religions, we persecute, and in a power madness, instead of attacking those that are strong, they always attack the weaker. That really shows a lot of power, doesn't it? To attack those who can't attack you back. But understand, if there is a creator, and we are only borrowing the classroom of earth for a certain time, hoping to graduate or fail, then we're playing very, very, very funny with the dean of students, who may report us to the president of the college, who may report us to the board, who may see that we get expelled or shunted away from this planet. It's been done before. And if any of the abductions that are happening, those lizards are back claiming their own once more. Let me deal with that, something that a lot of people want to skirt. And I can only tell you how my research has found a truth. There is no truth till you decide what truth is. For you must find your own truth. But I will give you things that may lead to an inflection or to a way of helping you form that truth. We're hearing on radio, we're seeing on television, we're seeing in the movies about what is called abductions. And it's said to be done by what are called aliens. I went through a definition earlier about what I consider alien versus an extraterrestrial. These alien abductions are said to be interesting, for they happen on different levels. On some levels, supposedly the person is taken and implanted, either right here, the bridge at the nose, or the medulla stem, where the medulla, again, gets the 32nd vertebra. And there, supposedly, is implants. Things that if they remove, the person dies. They can't remove them. There have been many reports of cadavers, again, when the surgeons have to go in there for autopsy, where they've seen them, seen these things implanted in there. And at the time they were finding them in the 50s and 60s, that technology in micro-miniaturization did not exist knowingly within the United States august allopathic society. They're finding people who are implanted and seemingly are told or instructed on the subconscious level, right brain, to do certain things, and then they forget what it is that they're supposed to do, but yet they feel under hypnosis that at a certain time this will resurface. And under deep regression, hypnotic drugs and very excellent facilitators, they can't crack through on some of these people, and when they have, they've died. A few have been able to remember just parts of their kidnapping, or if they like to call it abduction, and what was done to them, and they shake in fear, and they hear about little grays, which are really called the Bafath people. The Bafath are from Betelgeuse. They've been around for a long time. They hear about the hook-nosed grays that came around in the 16th century from Upper Bulgaria, and are the Caucasoid Mountains and the Carpathian Seas, and so the Carpathian Mountains. They hear again about the dracons, or the reptiles or serpent people that seem to be in the shadows behind them. Even in the book by Whitney Scriber, even in some of the movies that you see, they always show you this reptilian form in the back, and even then they don't define what this reptilian form is. Why are they still hiding from you even when truth is being released? Because maybe a snake is a snake, and any reptile by any other name is still a snake. They still hiss, and they still hate humanoids. I have no fear of them, because the Father that I serve saw through their backward creation, and they will suffer much more than I will ever suffer. But the point is, again, they even have a time now to make a change. And even they are still using other people to carry out their vindictive vendetta. They're using the great people, the people from Betelgeuse, who have been cloned almost 6 different times. They can't absorb, they have no souls, they're about to go out of existence. And you ought to know, can you go out of this universe backwards? Yes, you can go out of this cosmos backwards, if you fall far enough away from the Creator's mentality, from the mind flow of the higher vibrations. These people seemingly made a deal with some of the world powers, power mad as they were. They already had all the money, they printed all the money they need, but that was not enough. They wanted technology that these little grays, these little viruses coming to a condemned, intoxicated planet could bring. So they seemingly made a deal in Russia with one source of them, and then they came and they lied and told the United States, well, we wouldn't make a deal with anybody else. If we serve you, we serve man. Almost like that movie, We Serve Man, a good culinary dish. So they said, well, we'll serve you, and all we'll ask is just one little thing. From time to time, we're going to take away some of your citizens. We're going to make them better because we're going to implant them. And plus, we've tagged them like you tag your animals now anyway. And we want to follow on this developing experiment, which has been going on now for literally 1,000,000 years. And in turn, we will give you some of the best technology to help you go forward, to be able to hold it against your enemies and be able to make them tremble before you. And plus, just to let you get into what is called free space and teach you how to go from planet to planet. Well, the power-mad people bought it. Then they found out that they were supposed to report ahead of time the names of the people they were abducting so they could make, cover up for it again, per se, the missing time, if you would. But then they found they were abducting lots of people they weren't reporting, and some of the people weren't coming back. Then they found that when you make a deal with Shaitan, that sometimes Shaitan doesn't really have to hold homage to you. No clause in there that he has to respect, because he's not, again, of the same court system. Sometimes I get kind of sick of my humor, but I think nobody can be sicker than the people that I'm seeing people worship and idolize. So I think I can be a little bit neurotic if they're already psychotic. In looking at this setup and in understanding the little bit that I do of Earth history, I say that they could have used the previous past history to see that that deal has never worked yet, especially since they believe in the devil, and many of them do, and in a supreme being called a God, and Jesus, and many of the other avatars, and they go to churches or profess to. Most of these politicians will show up in church simply because they want you to vote for them. But obviously they don't believe in the tenets of their religion, or they would not do what they did because they would know they can't get away with it. So obviously they're hypocrites. And like all hypocritical people, they have weaknesses. They then said, well, we've got a deal here, and we're not able to control it too well. NASA, I got a problem. Interpol, I got a big problem. We need help. So they took their best scholarly minds from 13 countries and every state in the United States that had an advanced genius or intellect. And they put them together under what they call the Jason Scholars, first under MJ 32, then MJ 12. The best thing they could come up with a plot to blow up Titan and genetically alter and genetically erase certain species on Earth